And welcome to my tutorial. I'm so glad that you're here to watch. I am Katie Nelson, known as Katie the Creative Lady, and you can find me at katiethecreativelady.com. I'm going to talk to you today about why and how to use basic shadows on digital layouts. I'm not going to cover more advanced shadowing that would be used with digital flowers or ribbons. I'm going to focus on the kind of shadowing that you would do with layering papers and photos. I will cover advanced shadowing in a future tutorial. I'm going to be using my Groovy Greens collection throughout this video. It's part of my Color Stories series, which has been so fun to create. Just wanted to walk you through it. I always include 24 pocket cards, 12 of the size of 3x4 and 12 of the size of 6x4. So you have a variety to use depending on which orientation of photos and cards you like to use. These are the filler cards. I'm just going to walk through these. I love quotes by John Muir, and there's so much nature and beauty in green that it was just important to include some of that. There's a variety of ideas and quotes and sayings here to add a little fun touch to your pages. I always like to include some journaling cards as well, because I think it's so important to tell the story that goes with your photos. The digital paper pack is another fun one. It turned out to have such a groovy feeling to it that's why I named it Groovy Greens. But there are many different types of designs that you can use. A gradient here on the left, it turns white up in the corner, so you might be losing that little left corner against the white background. I love these happy little flowers, and teeny tiny polka dots are my favorite. I just love those. And this little fun, funky stripe is based on grass cloth. I don't know if any of you were around in the 70s, but grass cloth wallpaper was a thing, and this reminded me of that. The leaves, of course, are always important with green. A really pretty damask pattern. The limes, there's a lot you can do with those, and that gingham. And this is a very groovy print, but I love it. It's so fun as an accent on your layouts. And the pretty vines. This tiny stripe, it might be a little hard to tell on your screen that it's a stripe, but it sure looks nice on layouts. You'll see it on a layout later in this tutorial. And these flower burst designs, I love those too. Okay, the template set is one I'm going to be using in this tutorial, and it's such a great way to illustrate shadowing because some of the photos overlap each other. All of my template sets include double page and single page layouts, so you can choose which you like to use. For the stamps and brushes, these beautiful sayings and quotes are something that you can use on any project and any color. If you haven't used digital stamps and brushes, be sure to check out my tutorial explaining how to do that, and I will link to that in the comments. The shadowing on digital layouts is kind of a hot topic. It's one that people have strong opinions about. Some people really don't like digital shadows. Some people don't understand why somebody wouldn't use a shadow. I think there's use for both approaches, and I think it's just really important to understand why you would use shadows, and if you study them a little bit, you'll understand and get a good feeling for when to use them and when to leave them off. And it's really important to understand what settings to use. I make that easy because I already pre-shadow my templates for you, and you can cheat a little bit by looking at my settings, so I'll show you how to do that. Okay, if you just set down a piece of paper and some photos on a table and take a picture, you're going to notice the shadows. These are older photos, more than 20 years old, and so you can see they're even curved up a little bit on the edges. Notice where the shadows fall. Mostly off to the left, a lot up towards the top, but also some along the bottom and all the sides. So take a look at that. Those are just randomly placed. This is an old scrapbook of ours that's about 22 years old, and it was made for my husband for Father's Day. in 1999. And you can see, the photos aren't completely glued down, the photo and the paper backing. It's, I used tape on it. So you can look off to the left and see the shadowing. You can see just a little bit all around the edge. In fact, this is such a close-up view, you can even see where I didn't trim the paper completely on that right side. Okay, here's another one. These are old Creative Memories pages for those of you who were around during that time. And you can see the lifting, the slight lift. These are even probably a little more exaggerated than regular shadows because they were not completely glued down all the way to the edge, and they are older, so they have a little more lift. But it's a good visual for you to see what I mean by shadowing. Here's a digital layout made from one of the templates in my greens collection. And this is an important one to look at. Look at the edges, especially the left top. Go along the left side, even look around the bottom. See how the photo has a very slight lift off the paper. It's very slight. For me, when I use a digital shadow, I imagine that these photos would be completely glued down all the way to the edges. I'm not going to have old curled photos. So this is the look that I like for digital shadows. Now you can get a closer look and it gives you really a nice idea of the shadow. Especially pay attention to where this one is overlapping this photo. Without shadows, which is what I've done here, that distinction gets lost. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it looks a lot more natural when you have a shadow, because that's what would happen in real life. Even though these are digital layouts, we're trying to emulate what a photo page would look like. Here's a template of mine from another set. This is the Mentally Healthy collection. And I picked this one because it has so many different layers of a photo, of a paper strip, 2 different papers, all these photos and card spaces on top. And I thought this would be helpful to look at. This is one that I've used for a page about our visit to the John Muir Woods. And you can see that striped paper being as a paper strip. You can see how it's separated a little bit from the background. You can see the lift of the photos. If you zoom in, you can even get a better look. Now, if I take away the shadows, it will have a whole different look. And I'm going to show you how to do that. If you're opened in Photoshop Elements, and each layer is going to that has a shadow on it, it's going to have a little FX by the side. And that means it's got a style or an effect on it. And if you click on that, right click, you can clear the layer style. And then it will make it go flat right here on the page. You can go through and do that for each layer. You can even select several layers at once by holding down the Command key on a Mac or the Control key on a PC, and then just hit clear the layer style. When you do that, you can have a whole different look to your paper. It's very flattened without shadows. Then, and I just want to make sure I'm on the right one here. Okay, then when you go and you want to take advantage of that shadow style, if you click on this, when you right click, you can right click so that you can clear the layer style. But if you click in, and you can see my shadow settings here, and this might be something that you would even want to write down, or I will show you how to use these same settings. But I like a 45-degree angle because that's going to give you that little extra lift up on this side, just like happened in real life with my actual photos. I've played around a lot with these settings, and I like the size of 10 with a distance of 9 and the opacity at 35. You can, of course, play around with those settings and see and that's a good way to understand shadows. You can see as you get the size a lot bigger what happens as you lower it, as you change your distance. You can get some pretty intense shadows this way. Change your opacity. You can change the angle to see what you like. Some people prefer a 90-degree angle. Others, use a negative 45 degrees. There's all different approaches. But this is the one that I really like. These are my favorite settings. And these are the settings I use on all of my templates. So if you want to be able to use that same setting, you could just go in and hit copy layer style. Then you don't even have to remember to write down all those numbers. Then when you go into a new document, you just hit paste layer style and you can see that photo is shadowed. Now sometimes when I paste it, it will change the angle. So always be sure you go in and check. Once you have the angle set right for one photo, the other ones that you put in there will default to that same angle. It's just sometimes that happens when I copy and paste into different canvases. So in this case, I'll just duplicate this same photo so you can see how they look overlapped on each other when they have the shadows. It would look pretty strange if I didn't have a shadow there. Now in this template that I designed for this set, I used an overlapping photo space. I like this look. But if I took away that layering, that shadow, the layering would look a little strange. So, that's how I could do that. It would be a lot different if I took away the layering in this section. But when I take away the shadowing here, it has a much different effect. Okay, so in this layout here, this is what it would look like when I take away the shadows. You can see that it's still a nice layout, but it just doesn't have quite the same look. It's just, to me, it looks digital. I think it looks a little better if you're not trying for a layered look to go with the flat design. There's nothing wrong with a flat design. In fact, it is a style. It's a more graphic design type of style. And for me, it really looks nice against a white background, keeping it very simple. So that is certainly one approach that you could take. And I think that looks nice. You're not trying to look overly layered here. Now you also could still use your shadowing on the white background, and that has a really nice look too. All right, back to this. You can see the difference between that overlapping photo when it's shadowed and when it's not. Here's another interesting approach when you want to do some shadowing. I want to explain to you there's sometimes things you wouldn't want to shadow. So I'm putting these different pieces in, and I'm going to paste my layer style again so that I have that same shadow that I like to use so much. But a lot of people have wondered, well, why don't I shadow my journaling? Oh, and again, just check. Make sure that when you paste it in, that your angle is still where you want it. So some people might think, well, shouldn't you shadow the journaling? That doesn't look as natural. It's certainly something you could do and you could play around with, but it's not something that you would usually see on a typed piece of journaling. Now, one exception might be if you want to shadow the title. And I would do this if you were using a really bold font. This font is called Phosphate. And so that looks a little nicer. In fact, you could turn it into a really big title and maybe move it up to the bottom or the top of the page. And then you could just have that, oops, a little mistake there. So if you enlarge it and you're using that shadowed look, you could even fill it with some patterned paper. It looks more like an alpha that way instead of just typed text. So that would be maybe one time I would do shadowing on text, is if I was using it for a really big, bold title and you wanted that look where it looked almost like an alpha. Most of the time, I'm not going to shadow even my titles because for me, I think they look just fine when they're not shadowed too. It just depends on what you want. So here I'll show you what it looks like without the shadow. And that's nice too. So both of those are great options. All right, as I said, a nice flat look where you just have the photos and no shadowing, that's certainly fine. If that's what you prefer, that's great. This is almost like it would be all one photo together. It's a collage, and that is a great look too. So it just depends on what you are hoping to achieve. If just pay attention to the shadows that you see around, you'll start to notice them. If you use templates from other designers, click on their shadow styling and see what they do for their shadows. I like to copy the shadow settings to keep it easier. And whether you use shadows or not, it's all good. You're creating and you're learning what you like with your own creations. So that is a great thing. I hope that you will subscribe to my YouTube channel. That really helps you find my new videos. And it would be great if you just hit the thumbs up if you liked this video. That helps me a lot. I will see you next time, and be sure to follow me on my site at katiethecreativelady.com.